In the 1870s, a new trend in women's fashion emerged in Europe: plume feathers on hats. What started as a small trend in the cities would grow into a worldwide phenomenon, involving the deaths of millions of birds, and the death of a man who gave his life defending the very birds he once poached. This is the story of Guy Bradley. By the 1880s, lavish hats adorned with bird feathers had become exceedingly popular. Feathers from all types of birds were in demand, including egrets, flamingos, great white herons, tricolored herons, and especially the plume feathers of the snowy egret, or little snowies. These feathers were known as aigrettes, which could only be collected during the breeding season. Plume hunters had killed millions of birds for these feathers, often shooting and plucking all the adults in a rookery, leaving the baby birds to starve. As a result, many species were pushed to extinction. Areas like Flamingo, which had lost its native flamingo population, are just now seeing the return of the very bird that gave the town its name. During the 1880s and 90s, unskilled workers could make $10 a week, working 10-hour days, but a plume hunter could get the same amount for just one perfect plume. Plume hunting was legal during this time, so many men went out in search of fortune in the rookeries. Plume hunters were not the only threat to bird populations, however. Ornithologists, photographers, ecologists, private taxidermists, and collectors all shot and collected birds either for study, their collection, or to photograph. By the end of the 1880s, most bird populations around populated cities in South Florida had been wiped out, forcing hunters deeper into the Everglades territory. To combat the dwindling populations, in 1883, the American Ornithological Union, or AOU, was created in New York. This group began campaigning against the use of feathers as ornamentation, and drafted laws to be passed to protect non-game birds completely. Harriet Hemingway founded the Massachusetts Audubon Society in 1896. Similar to the AOU, its goal was to promote the protection of bird species and diversity, and put a stop to the millinery trade. This was the first Audubon Society, and within 6 years of its founding, 30 more state Audubon Societies were formed. They worked with the AOU in educating the public about the dangers of the millinery trade, and pushed for laws to be passed to protect the birds that were being hunted. While they succeeded in getting their laws passed, very few states instituted any way of enforcing them. As a result, the AOU and Audubon societies were left to have to hire game wardens, who were deputized by local law enforcement to enforce their new law. In 1903, one of these wardens was assigned to oversee the keys to Cape Sable. His name was Guy Bradley of Flamingo, Florida. Guy Morrell Bradley was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1870. At the age of 6, his family moved to Lake Worth, Florida, and on January 2, 1883, Edwin Ruthven Bradley, Guy's father, took a job as the keeper of Fort Lauderdale's House of Refuge. A leaky cistern forced him and his family to use a well next to their house. The previous keeper had fallen deathly ill, and it is believed that the well was the cause of this illness, which also affected the Bradley family. E.R. Bradley and his wife Lydia were unaffected, but their 5 children were not as lucky. Guy fell very ill, which made it impossible for him to walk at times, and Flora, his youngest sister, would succumb to the illness, passing that same year. Guy had to be carried to her grave. His sickness left him sickly and frail for over a year. As a result, their father would resign as the keeper of Fort Lauderdale, moving his family back to Lake Worth County. In the later months of 1885, a friend of Lou's, Charlie Pierce, who happened to also be an Illinois native, took Lou and his younger brother on a 3-week plume hunting trip in the swamp west of Lantana. It was described as a great adventure by Charlie, but Guy's strength hadn't yet returned, causing him not to participate in the hunting itself. A year later, Guy's father would win a bid to become the first barefoot mailman in the area. This was a taxing job that involved a weekly round trip from Lake Worth to Biscayne Bay. He would alternate doing this route with his eldest son Lou. The job paid well, $600 a year. Guy would become quite the hunter during this time, taking down deer, turkeys, and hunting birds for their plumage. And by 1993, the Bradleys would move to Flamingo, Florida. Lydia would become friends with the mother of another family moving to the area that same year, Rebecca Smith, the wife of Walter Smith. Walter Smith was a Confederate veteran. After losing the Civil War, he found it difficult to find steady work that fulfilled him. And in 1993, he and his wife Rebecca moved to Flamingo, Florida. And that's where Walter, who was 51, met Guy Bradley for the first time, who was only 23. The two soon became friends, not knowing that they would become deadly enemies. 4 years after this meeting, Smith would become the postmaster in Flamingo, and had a proposition for his friends Guy and Lou. Due to his sons being too young, Tom Smith, his eldest, was only 10 at the time, offered Lou and Guy to help him shoot birds in large quantities, and the young men accepted, sailing around the Keys in Smith's blue boat, the Cleveland, collecting feathers. During this time, the Massachusetts Audubon Society had been publishing articles about the danger of plume hunting to the local ecosystems. This made Bradley begin to second-guess his profession. In 1898, Guy's life would change forever, when a schooner from northern Florida arrived with one Sophronia Vickers Curvin. Franny, as she preferred to be called, was moving to Key West with her family, and she had caught the eye of Guy Bradley. Key West was along his boating route, and his trips to Key West became considerably more frequent. He and Franny were married a year later, on May 12, 1899. They moved to the house that Guy had built in Flamingo, but also rented a house in Key West so Franny could be close to her family. In that house, their first son, Morrell Bradley, was born on September 19, 1990, with a second, Ellis Bradley, on November 8, 1903. Bradley's new wife wasn't the average lady of the time. She quite enjoyed boxing, often sparring with Guy's friends who were surprised by her skill. Easily slipping past their defenses, Guy always found this quite amusing and was very proud of his wife. By 1902, the AOU was about to get its bird protection law passed, protecting non-game birds, and as a result making plume hunting illegal. But the states did nothing to enforce the law, meaning that the AOU had to find a game warden. Guy received a letter offering him a position that paid $35 a month to be the game warden for Monroe County, which he promptly accepted. His first report includes some of the altercations that he had, including run-ins with hunters shooting gators for their skins, which was perfectly legal at the time, checking on the rookeries to make sure that nobody was hunting there, and erecting signs discouraging the practice. While hanging one of these signs, he narrowly escaped getting bit by a cottonmouth. Bradley made quite a few arrests during his time as game warden. He had multiple altercations with Walter Smith and his sons in particular, arresting Tom Smith twice for shooting birds. Walter told Guy that he'd kill him if he ever did that again. In the spring of 1905, the Smiths' house was fired upon suddenly at night. After the shooting had stopped, Walter ran outside, finding no one. He sailed to the Keys the next day and purchased a powerful .38 caliber Winchester rifle. Needless to say, tensions were running high in the community. On the morning of July 8, 1905, the sound of gunfire ripped through the morning peace. Guy Bradley stepped out of his house looking towards the sound of the gunfire. He saw a small blue schooner anchored off Oyster Keys. He recognized the boat. It was the same one he had once hunted from many years ago. It was the Cleveland, Walter Smith's vessel. Guy's usual boat, the Audubon, was out of commission, so he had to use a small rowboat to sail out to the islands. Franny told him goodbye from the water's edge before heading back inside the house. This was the last time she would see her husband alive. Walter Smith saw Bradley approaching. Bradley fired a warning shot into the air to stop Walter's boys from shooting. They fired again into the rookery before climbing into the boat carrying dead cormorants. According to Smith, Bradley called out, saying, "I want your son, Tom." "Well, if you want him, you have to have a warrant." "I don't need one. I saw them shoot into the rookery. I see the dead birds. Put down your gun, Smith." "You are one of them fellows who shot into my house, and I'll not put my gun down when you are near me. If you want him, you have to come aboard this boat and take him." "Put down that rifle, and I will come aboard," the guy responded, before cursing him and shooting at him with his pistol. Smith jumped behind the mast of his schooner before firing back at Bradley. "He didn't know what hit him," is how he would describe the event later. Bradley fell forward in his boat and drifted out to sea. Smith then sailed his boat to the Keys, turning himself in and giving his recollection of events. He claimed to not know whether Guy was alive or dead, despite already telling his family that he had killed him. In Smith's version of events, he was purely acting in self-defense, despite the fact that when examined, Guy's pistol showed no signs of being fired recently. However, the Key West grand jury decided not to indict Walter for murder. To this day, it is unknown if Smith was taking advantage of the situation to remove the thorn in his side that had been Guy Bradley, or, true to his word, was acting in self-defense. They found Guy's body in his boat the next day after the confrontation. His family buried him in the southernmost point of East Cape Sable. This was the end of Guy Bradley's life, but just the beginning of his legacy. Guy Bradley's death received widespread media attention. After the death of 2 other game wardens, the National Association of Audubon Societies shifted its energy away from putting game wardens into these dangerous positions, and instead focused on shifting public opinion of the millinery trade, and the use of feathers as ornamentation. Bradley's death became something for these groups to rally behind, pushing for stronger legislation and protections for birds. Today, Guy Bradley is remembered for his sacrifice and has a visitor center located in the same town where he lived, Flamingo, Florida, in Everglades National Park. A plaque was placed at Guy's gravesite in the 1930s. It now resides at that same visitor center, named for Flamingo's first game warden. It reads as follows: Guy M. Bradley, 1870 to 1905. Faithful unto death as game warden of Monroe County, he gave his life for the cause to which he was pledged.